When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the Vehicle Owner's Manual for important feature limitations and information.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Last Man Standig podcast. Yes, I'm your host, Ben Standig, and I cover the Washington Commanders for The Athletic. It's Sunday evening here, and I am in Tampa, Florida, because of course I am. That's where the Washington Commanders played today against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They fell 37-20. Lots to discuss here. I've already had a conversation about this with our guy Mike Smelt, but gonna do it again. Had some technical issues, but we'll get Mike back on the podcast this week, or at least after the Giants game, as we'll do what Mike and I talk after each game. Before I get into, well, I'll just say this. You guys have heard me talk a lot about how this organization, this management, Adam Peters, etc. They did not really plan this group for the 2024 season. This is about building something, both upgrading the talent, but also upgrading the competitiveness, the mindset, finding an identity. And these things were not expected to be done this year. I know they've talked about ready to win, but a lot of their holes that we saw, or that we thought were holes before the season started, have remained holes and were pretty much exposed for the most part in this game. They didn't go hardcore to fill some of them in the short term, but they're hoping long term they have some answers. And so my mindset going into this podcast will be of that mindset, of that approach still. I know for a lot of you, you don't want to hear about it. You pay good money, you spend your time. They're 0-1. They didn't look particularly competitive in this game, and that's all completely fair. And if this thing continues to unravel in ways that doesn't show growth and improvement, then we'll have a different conversation. But I'm just preparing everybody to say that I'm not going to say that the sky is falling, but I am going to say that they are at the moment who we thought they were, and I don't mean that in a good way. This isn't the Dennis Green praising somebody. This is to say they're a team that's got some problems. So we'll get to it all in a minute, and of course talk about Jayden Daniels, his first NFL game. There were some good things to like and some other parts where he clearly will need to work on. So we'll get to that in a moment. Here on the Last Man Standing podcast, you know the deal. Follow on iTunes or wherever you do your podcast. We got a second to drop a rating and a review. That definitely helps the cause there. And of course, you can follow me on The Athletic. Subscribe there as well. Just as The Athletic, I'll have a story up in the morning about this game. You can, of course, David Aldridge also wrote. And if in case you missed it the last few days, I've had a bunch of different stories up. I had one on the start-sit debate for rookie quarterbacks. Not that it applies necessarily to Jayden Daniels, but it does come down a lot to how do you plan to develop this player. I delve into what Washington did a bit, but also spoke to people like Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, EJ Manuel, Adam Peters is in the story as well, and others. So you check that out, along with my Jayden Daniels profile, in case you missed that one the other day, about all that he's got to deal with coming into this organization that hasn't had much quarterback success in forever. Talk to people like Joe Theismann to get that perspective, and also Jayden Daniels as well. Okay, let's get to this game. Okay, where to begin? 37-20. I guess let's go through this. I'm going to go through this position by position or group by group, because it may just be easier that way for me to do this. But let's start with the offense. Well, actually, let me back it up here. So we know that this team only used its starters for the most part for 3 series in the preseason. And then some guys, like the 2 defensive tackles, Bobby Wagner and others, didn't even play at all. And when you go to some level of that extreme, you're going to have, I think, some starts like this. Now, maybe they don't result in losses because the other team's got their own issues, but this, I think, was just a particularly bad matchup in this regard. While Washington only has 21 players back from last season's team, and just what I said. We're pretty light with what they did in the preseason, which I'm not knocking. That was a step towards protecting guys' health, and for the most part, this team is pretty healthy, right? But Tampa Bay is a team that's been there, done that team. Yeah, they're not like one of the juggernauts in the NFC, but they've won that division 3 times in a row between Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, who had 2 touchdowns, Chris Godwin, who had a touchdown, Vita Vea, Levante David, a bunch of others, Todd Bowles is the coach. Like they've got a lot of continuity there, and Washington does not. So even if both teams were sort of, say did this exact same offseason program, the Bucs kind of know where they're at. Washington has got a lot to work on still, on all sides of the ball. So I just think that's something to note right off the bat. Let's get to the offense, though. I think Jayden Daniels had a pretty solid game. Now, obviously, he did much better with the run than he did as a passer. He was electric at times running the ball. Sounds like Tampa Bay was very impressed with what his ability to evade pass rushers, to make moves in the open field, and that was all positive. However, he did have 2 1-yard rushing touchdowns, and he did also get down at times, more of a tumble than a slide, frankly. But okay, he got down at times. But there were other times where he's going for the extra yard. Twice he got hit where his helmet popped off. One time he got hit right in the helmet, and he stayed in the game and seemed to be fine afterwards. He ran the ball 16 times. He didn't seem to have an issue with it. I asked him about that. He said, "Hey, I'm just doing what I can to win." Dan Quinn had a slightly different view of that. I think he was not as excited about all that running, but I don't know that Jayden Daniels always had a choice to do otherwise. He was under some pressure, and they weren't getting a lot of guys open down the field. I'm curious to hear what Dan Quinn has to say after watching the tape. Well, we'll talk to Dan Quinn on Monday. And look, I think that then in terms of the passing with Daniels, Dan Quinn made a comment after the game about how Jayden, he thought, was able to show all his different skill sets. I don't know that we saw enough in the passing game to honestly say that. Uh, it was just a bit choppy. He only threw the ball down the field a couple times, both to Terry McLaurin, I believe. One down the far left sideline, the first play of the second half, and Terry was open, but the ball was just overthrown. There was another time Terry ran out of the slot on the left side, so a good example of Cliff Kingsbury not just doing what is expected of him, where he always has his X receiver on the left. He broke McLaurin out a little bit to different spots. Nonetheless, the ball was incomplete. The other receivers, whether we're talking about De'Ami Brown, Zacchaeus, Luke McCaffrey, Noah Brown was inactive for this game. There just wasn't a lot to get a lot of separation. Now I have not watched the tape back at this point, so perhaps we'll find some guys who are wide open that he just missed, but I don't get that sense right now. So look, Tampa Bay is a very difficult defense. As Zach Ertz after the game was saying, he's seen veteran quarterbacks really look puzzled against the Todd Bowles defense. So again, all things being equal, I think Jayden Daniels had a fine debut. He is part of a long line of first-round picks making their debuts in week 1 who have lost going into this week. Those guys were 1-12. Let me take it back. 1-11 in the last 12 starts, where a rookie quarterback makes his first start in his rookie season. Caleb Williams did win today for the Bears, so that's the second one, but he wasn't particularly impressive. And Daniels and Bo Nix both lost. So in the last 15 games, where a rookie quarterback has started in his rookie season, the debut, they are now 2-13. Okay, that's it. Now, I think one positive here for sure is the running back situation. Brian Robinson delivered what I've been telling you guys to get ready for. He is just a powerhouse back there, not just as a runner, showed good hands as well. Austin Eckler, I said, hey, I thought he had a pretty good summer, but I wanted to see it against an actual defense. He showed some good pop as a receiver as well. They combined for 103 yards receiving. I think another 50 on the ground. I think that going forward, I wrote the other day and talked about how Cliff Kingsbury, this is going to have to be a year where his tactical acumen is going to have to be pretty significant if this offense is going to have a chance, not to help Jayden Daniels, but to mask a lot of their deficiencies. Well, I think one way to potentially do that is, how do you get Eckler and Robinson on the field together? I think that is something that maybe very much needs to happen, but we'll see if that's, I'm not saying you change up everything you're doing in 1 week, but I am saying it's something they're going to have to think about for Sure. Receiver, but there just wasn't much there to get into. We did talk to, or Terry McLaurin spoke to the reporters, and one thing I thought he said that it was interesting, and I wrote about this a bit, was that he acknowledged that, hey, look, he's gone through this a lot, the losing, the inconsistencies on offense. And he's admitted that there's been times in the past where he's maybe lost his focus, trying to worry about too much about making a big play, has lost his focus, and maybe that's hurt the cause at times. He said, though, specifically, he was really trying to not do that here, in part because he wanted to be a good teammate and have a good attitude, but do it also because Jayden Daniels is a rookie and he doesn't want to be a bad influence or show him, he's one of the vets that Jayden's going to learn from. So he's trying to make a good example for him. And he said Jayden was encouraging him throughout the game that, hey, whatever happened, don't worry, I'll get it to you. I'll keep firing. We'll work it out. Beyond that, though, there wasn't really much to discuss in terms of the passing game. Again, kind of want to see the tape to see what was there that maybe we missed, or more importantly, they missed. Eckler had a team high 4 catches, Robinson 3, Ertz, McCaffrey had 3, Terry had 2. I'll be very curious to see what happens here going forward. I know Byron Pringle was released on Friday after I finished that podcast. I'm guessing he'll be back this week. Vested veterans, guys who've been around for over 4 years or more, if they're on the week 1 roster, they're automatically, the contract gets guaranteed. So I'm guessing they said that to Pringle, hey, we don't really want to guarantee this, but we'll bring you back. I don't know that for fact, but that just seems to be the logical conclusion. They didn't even fill the roster spot this week, but even still, that's not really going to help too much on the receiver room. I don't know what more they can do. The fact that Luke McCaffrey's been getting involved early seems like a help, but at the same time, we haven't seen too much from him this summer either. So lots of questions there, and I do wonder if using the 2 running backs helps out. The tight end situation, look, Zach Ertz didn't have a ton of chances, 4 targets, 3 catches, 28 yards. If they're in the red zone a bit more, I think he's a guy that can help, but ultimately we'll see. John Bates is a blocker and Ben Sinnott. I don't know if that's going to be anytime soon for Sinnott to get heavily involved, but who knows? Maybe. By the way, Luke McCaffrey, former college quarterback, took a pass from Daniels. It was kind of a screen, but maybe it was in front, a forward pass, but it looked like McCaffrey had eyes on throwing the ball back to Daniels across the field. Ultimately, he didn't. But hey, it's an interesting wrinkle if they go forward with that.
Hey everyone, Bram Weinstein here, play-by-play voice of the Commanders and founder of Empire Media, and we are so excited that Ben Standig has come along and joined us with Empire with his awesome podcast, Last Man Standig. I wanted to tell you about our 2 other primary shows, and selfishly, mine, the Bram Weinstein Show, which can be heard on ESPN 630 in DC from 11 to 12, but then becomes a podcast that goes up immediately at 12 o'clock, 5 days a week. Some of the best Commanders and DC sports coverage you're going to get. So if you love Ben's show, check out mine as well. And also don't forget to check out the John Keim Report from Empire Media as well, the ESPN Insider. We are bringing you the best Commanders coverage all season long. Be sure to subscribe to all 3 of our Empire shows, Last Man Standing, The Bram Weinstein Show, and The John Keim Report.
On the offensive line, Brandon Coleman did play a little bit. Cornelius Lucas started at left tackle, but Coleman was able to get in there as Dan Quinn suggested that he would. I, again, want to see the tape. It's also see some of the advanced stats out there to see how everybody kind of did. It felt like the Bucs only had 2 sacks. They weren't like all over Jayden Daniels, but at the same time, they were effective, right? So the Bucs had 2 quarterback hits, not much, right? So Washington had 4. Anyway, so I don't know if the offensive line was a mess or anything, but at the same point, Jayden Daniels running 16 times. Again, how much was he felt he needed to run, and how much of that was like he just maybe was too hyper focused on trying to run and didn't allow the play to develop. Nonetheless, we'll see how that looks. Okay, let's switch over to the defense. Ultimately, look, the Tampa Bay had the ball 8 real possessions, so not counting the running out the clock at the end. 8 real possessions, they scored 7 times. They scored on they scored on all 4 possessions in the first half. They scored on the first one of the second half. That is, you can't win like that, allowing a team to score 7 of 8 drives. Now that Washington did hold Tampa Bay twice to field goals when the ball was in the red zone, but they just could never consistently get going. And I think one of the issues is, again, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but the limitations that this team has can be offset if the star players play at the level they're expected. And I don't know that Deron Payne and John Allen did that necessarily. If you just look at the stats, and the stats don't always show the whole story, they had a combined 3 tackles and 1 quarterback hit. That's just not going to get it done. And if they're not commanding double teams and causing havoc, then it's going to be a lot harder for Dorrance Armstrong and Frankie Louvu and others. Jamin Davis, by the way, had a nice tackle for loss, snuck inside. So he had some good moments, but they're going to have to get more on Allen and Payne. Now, what was happening today, again, need to look at. Tampa Bay's got some good pieces along their offensive line, but if those guys aren't making a big impact, this is going to be a long haul up there. It just felt like in general with his defense that it looked, let's be honest, it looked like very similar to what we saw last year in a lot of ways, particularly in the secondary. We'll get there in a second, but it just looked like they were sort of out of sorts way too many times. Again, they were fortunate to still be in the game in the first half because Baker Mayfield missed on a few opportunities. And again, they had to settle for some field goals. There's definitely some concern there. Bobby Wagner, as expected, led the way with 10 tackles. Quan Martin had 9. Sanders still 6. Yeah, I mean, that's all there is to it. By the way, we'll get the snap counts out on Monday, and that will be very interesting to see who played, and for how long. But just in general, the defense just didn't really give Tampa Bay much of a hassle at all. The Bucs had nearly 400 yards of offense. They completed 9 of 13 third downs. Dan Quinn said third downs were the huge difference in this game. Not only did the Bucs go 9 of 13, but Washington only went 2 of 8. So they did convert a fourth down, but only 2 of 8. So that was a huge difference. Tampa Bay was able to control the clock in the first half, finished with 33 minutes of time of possession to 26 for Washington, and not the game was kind of over by the time the fourth quarter was going, but they just, really just Washington looked tired that they ran over them. It was a hot day, to say the least, here in Tampa. But then there's the secondary, and if you want to talk about something that looked very similar, the secondary looked very much like we saw them last year. Mike Evans, of course, is a monster. He scored 2 touchdowns. One was against Benjamin St-Juste, who, as we've seen many times, was there in coverage, but just did not get his head around where the ball was. Evans, essentially, with the ball was sort of ahead of both of them. Evans reached out to grab it, and St-Juste just did not know where it was. He apparently told Dan Quinn he understood what happened, and Dan Quinn appreciated that. If the player, it's one thing to make a mistake, it's another thing to not know what you did. That could be a tough deal. Manuel Forbes, be curious to see what the final numbers were against him. He had some tough moments for sure. At one point, he had a 22-yard pass interference against Jalen McMillan, the Bucs' third-round pick, because McMillan had a double move, was going to essentially get in position to get a touchdown, but Forbes fouls him. He also had on the same play a face mask penalty to tack on even more yards, and Chris Godwin scored a 4-yard touchdown on the next play. Forbes did go to the locker or go get x-rays after the game, but I don't think there was anything serious from what I gather. But what is serious is that this secondary continues to be a problem, and I don't know how they're going to solve this again unless there's some big changes tactically. But I'm curious again, what Joe Witt, what did he see here? This was the first game the defense played that wasn't vanilla, but it was a rocky road, let's just say, with what we saw out of them. I did think Mikey Sanders still, he was near McMillan on McMillan's touchdown. It was a zone play, so I don't quite know whose responsibility it was ultimately. He did have one of my favorite plays for the defense. It was a play that also showed kind of this defense is a bit out of not quite hitting it on all cylinders yet. There was a play where it was a run to the right for Rashard White, but Percy Butler ran across from left to right, chasing a receiver. He did so while sort of bumping Bobby Wagner off his stride. And as White turned up the field, the only person in his way was, 5'9" Mikey Sanderstill, and he stood tall. We've seen him do that this summer. He stood tall, made White, have to deal with him. I don't know if Sanderstill was going to take him down solo, but either way, it was enough of an impediment to get reinforcements. Wagner did make it over. So I thought Sanderstill showed some good stuff there, but this, like with a lot of things we saw today, it just did not necessarily match the versions that we were seeing of some of these guys this summer. And then, of course, you have the special teams. Cade York, I hope you didn't buy a jersey, a Commanders Cade York jersey, because we may not see him around for too much longer. He missed 2 field goals. Both were long, including a 56-yarder. That you can question why Dan Quinn had him do it. But, York has a big leg. The issue has been accuracy. He missed 2 kicks. He then, it's 13-0. Brian Robinson gets a 7-yard touchdown. Okay, they're in this game. 7 minutes to go in the first half. But then York kicks the ball out of bounds, giving Tampa Bay the ball at the 40. And from there, the Bucs ran 13 plays, culminating in another field goal to make it 16-7. But it basically ran all the clock out of the first half, helped tire up Washington's defense out a bit more. And when Dan Quinn was asked after the game if there's going to be another set of kicker tryouts, he didn't just say no. He's like, hey, that's going to be something we're going to have to look into, or just discuss, at least he said. So not a good sign there for Cade York either. Again, I liked the running backs. I thought they did a pretty good job, and I think that's going to have to be a way to figure out to get these guys on the field more. By the way, Austin Eckler was back for a little bit for kick returns. They had, of all people, Jeremy McNichols and Tyler Owens back on the first one. I swear if we saw them out there this year, I mean, there were times where they had like 10 plus guys returning kicks. I don't remember it though. So keep trying. And so I think you got to find ways to get them on the field more. Defensively, Dan Quinn talked about marrying the pass rush and the coverage. And yeah, that can sound a little coach speaky, but I do think there's a lot to it. In order for this secondary to succeed, they're going to need the pass rush to get the quarterback off balance or throw balls early, and then let guys like Forbes and Benjamin St-Juste, got some playmaking skills. Just they haven't turned them into plays. Pass rush always helps the secondary, and I think this one in particular needs it, but didn't get a lot of help today. And so it's a combination of both the front and the back end of the defense that led to Tampa Bay having a fair amount of success. Just in terms of the post game, really quick, Dan Quinn, look, he didn't make. I asked him, hey, this is a roster with only more than half the guys are new, or more than half of last year's group is gone. You only have 21 players back from last year. Plus, on top of that, you only played, in the name of injury prevention. In the name of injury prevention, you didn't play a lot of the guys this summer. But he said, no excuse. We thought we prepared well, but he said he just didn't ultimately see the energy he was expecting out there. Here's something though he also said. This was in his opening statement. He tends to make opening statements. He and Joe Witt Jr. do that. First of all, he mentioned that he thought third down was the key to the game, but then he said, look, so a lot to work on, and Tampa was the better team today. You need the struggle to see the identity develop. You don't want it, but you need it. That part is hard, and that struggle happened tonight. So we'll take these lessons and work on them. Again, there's a lot of coach speak in there. There's a lot of cliche kind of vibes. Hey, we understand it was a tough game. For now, I'm going to continue to buy into that. I have not wavered 1 second from the moment this all started that they are not trying to win this year. And again, just to be clear, they're not throwing games. That same thing happens in the NBA. When we say a team is tanking, they're not. And I'm not saying Washington is tanking. This is a very different sport. It's a very different deal. But guys are putting themselves in line. You don't throw games. But it's a matter of how much you're investing to help the cause. And while obviously they used, they got a lot of draft picks who they think are interesting players. They did sign a couple of guys to multi-year deals like Luvu and Tyler Biadasz. Most of the moves they made were very short-term deals, 1-year deals to try to help to try to try to help set the tone here. And that does not, in order to get guys who are difference makers, you have to draft them or pay them. And they didn't do much of the latter. And right now they are where they are because of that. So, we'll see where they're at. I think the first month of the year is probably what you need to see to take a full evaluation. So I'm not going to go too crazy on anything right now. But, again, you look at some of the secondary, the offensive tackles, the playmakers. And by the way, Jahan Dotson, I'm still fine with that. It doesn't matter that he didn't do much for the Eagles. He wasn't giving this group what they wanted. There were a couple of plays in the first half I thought were De'Ami Brown in particular was physical in run blocking, and that was a help. That was the kind of play Jahan Dotson wasn't giving them. Noah Brown was inactive this week. Not surprising, I guess, because he had only been here a short amount of time. I imagine he'll be up soon, probably next week, and he'll give them another blocker. But, that's a part of the deal in terms of like the identity, the culture, the attitude that they want to see. But at the same point, only Luke McCaffrey really has upside with these receivers. His upside is we just don't know yet. On top of the fact he's got some good tools and the bloodlines. So, yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it is right now. Again, it's one game. I swear I'm not being Pollyanna. I'm not saying, oh, it's all fine, nothing to see here. But, that I'm just telling you how I see it. And I do still see this as a group that is playing the long game. And therefore we have to be a little bit, give them a little bit of rope to see what happens. Again, it's only one game next week at home against the 0-1 Giants. Dan Quinn, I asked, how much are you gonna talk this week about the Giants versus yourself? And he said, hey, Monday, the first couple of days of the week, we absolutely were focusing on us. We have got to figure out what went wrong. They'll have, they use these Monday or Tuesday practices to have a conversation. What did we see? Let's be honest with each other, and then move forward with the Giants. I imagine there'll be a lot of things they'll have to be honest about once they get a look at the tape. But nonetheless, that's what you got to do. So we'll see. We'll talk more in the days ahead about what actually unfolded here with both Kingsbury and Joe Witt, what we saw from them. And, again, kicker could be different, all that. By the way, in case you missed it, Marcus Mariota was placed on IR on Saturday, and Jeff Driscoll was the number 2. They also brought Sam Hartman on to the 53 full-time. So Mariota is out at least, 4 weeks. We'll see what this means from there. I mean, hopefully, for everybody's sake, Jeff Driscoll never plays, right? Because Daniels is going. But I do think it's kind of interesting going forward. Mariota hurt his chest, or he was listed with the chest injury after Thursday's practice or Wednesday's practice when he was limited. Thursday was out, Friday was out. And the fact that they put him on IR definitely suggests that they are wondering what, how long he's going to be out. So we'll see where that goes with him. All right, that's it for now. I thank you again for the speed round of a post-game podcast. More to come this week. And again, of course, more writing on The Athletic. Last Man Standing, subscribe there. If you have interest, please subscribe to The Athletic. Or Last Man Standing on iTunes, the Athletic on The Athletic. You can follow me on X at Ben Standig. And I'll just mention Mike is at Mike Smeltz on Twitter, and you can hit him up on LinkedIn. He likes that. Mike is a godsend to help me here with the podcast, but I just had to start over, and it is what it is. Well, we'll get Mike back on though soon. We'll iron out a couple of these technical snafus, but no snafus with this with my analysis. I'm sticking to it. But we'll see. All right, the Commanders have a lot to work on. You guys appreciate that you listen to the content. That is it for now. Ben Standig signing off. Until next time.